I inherited my grandmother's house 2 years ago, a charming 1940s gem nestled on a sprawling 1.5-acre lot. The place was my childhood haven, where I spent summers learning woodworking from my grandfather in his creaky garage workshop. The house radiated character-gleaming hardwood floors, intricate crown molding, and a majestic oak tree out front, easily 80 years old. It stood out starkly against the sea of identical beige-sided homes in the surrounding Pine Grove subdivision, all built decades later. Barely a week after moving in, I received a glossy welcome packet from the Pine Grove Homeowners Association, HOA, complete with a hefty rulebook and a bill for quarterly dues. The rules were absurdly specific. Mailboxes could only be one of 3 approved beige shades. Grass couldn't grow past 2.5 inches, and holiday decorations were restricted to a pre-approved list of inflatable figures. Wanting to keep the peace, I paid the dues, mowed my lawn to precision, painted my mailbox the correct beige, and even removed the handcrafted wooden birdhouses my grandfather had made because they weren't approved. The HOA president, Margaret, was a force to be reckoned with. She patrolled the neighborhood daily in a gleaming white golf cart, armed with a clipboard and measuring tape, her eyes scanning for the slightest infraction. I once saw her measure a neighbor's lawn with a ruler, jotting notes like a detective on a case. For a year, I stayed off her radar, but then I decided to honor my grandfather's legacy by transforming his dilapidated garage into a professional workshop for my custom furniture business. I hired an architect to design a stunning conversion that matched the house's 1940s charm, complete with soundproofing, climate control, and decorative touches. I followed the city's rules to the letter, securing permits after a 6-week process. The city inspector even praised the thoughtful design. Construction began on a crisp Monday morning, and I was thrilled to see the project take shape. By Wednesday, a violation notice was taped to my front door, printed on official Pine Grove HOA letterhead. It cited Section 4.7 of the Community Covenants, claiming my unauthorized external modifications, incurred a $500 fine, and demanding an immediate halt to construction until the HOA's Architectural Review Committee approved it. I was livid. I'd spent thousands on permits and plans, all city approved. I called Margaret, who curtly informed me that city permits were irrelevant. HOA approval was paramount, and I had to use their pre-approved contractors. When I mentioned construction was underway, her tone turned icy, threatening more fines. Determined to resolve this, I attended the next HOA meeting at the sterile community clubhouse, where Margaret and 2 board members sat at a raised table, looking down at the sparse crowd. I presented my city-approved permits and architectural plans, explaining how the workshop would enhance the neighborhood. Margaret barely glanced at them, dismissing the permits as irrelevant and denying the project because I hadn't used an approved contractor. She handed me a list of 3 contractors later. I learned they were either board member relatives or paid HOA kickbacks. The board voted unanimously to uphold the fine and block my project. Margaret stared me down, saying the rules protected property values and that I shouldn't have moved to Pine Grove if I wanted freedom. Frustrated but convinced the HOA overstepped, I continued construction. This unleashed a torrent of harassment. Weekly violation notices appeared, each pettier than the last. A $200 fine for parking my work van in my driveway, deemed a commercial vehicle, another for leaves from my oak tree drifting onto a neighbor's lawn, and one for a handcrafted wooden reindeer I displayed during the holidays, which wasn't an approved inflatable. Margaret's patrols intensified. She drove by multiple times daily, snapping photos, measuring my grass, even inspecting my mailbox with a magnifying glass. Neighbors avoided me, clearly uncomfortable but too scared to speak up. 3 months in, a certified letter from the HOA's law firm arrived, stating my fines had ballooned to $4,000 and they placed a lien on my property, threatening foreclosure if I didn't pay and stop construction. This was war. I spent evenings and weekends at the county records office, poring over dusty binders and microfilm with help from a kind records clerk. After days of digging, I found a 1973 master plan for Pine Grove. My property, a small parcel in the subdivision's heart, was marked with a hand-drawn box labeled Lot A, existing parcel exempt from CC and RS. My grandmother's homestead predated the HOA, and the developer had built around it, explicitly excluding it from their jurisdiction. Heart pounding. I took this to a sharp property law attorney, Daniel, who confirmed the exemption was ironclad. The HOA had no authority over me and had committed fraud with their lien. Daniel advised me to stop paying dues and ignore their threats, betting they'd sue and expose their overreach in court. The HOA's letters grew nastier, and Margaret's harassment became relentless daily notices for absurd violations like excessive bird feeding after I hung a bird feeder. Finally, they filed a lawsuit to foreclose on my property, arrogantly assuming their authority was unassailable. The court date arrived, and I walked into the courthouse nervous but ready. Margaret and the board sat smugly with their attorney, dressed for a victory lap. Their lawyer presented a straightforward case. I lived in Pine Grove, ignored fines, and violated covenants. He waived their rulebook and fine notices, painting me as a rogue homeowner. Then Daniel took the floor. He didn't dispute the fines or workshop. Instead, he asked one question. Could the HOA prove my property was subject to their covenants? Their lawyer fumbled, presenting a generic HOA agreement. Daniel objected it only applied to members, which I wasn't. He projected the 1973 master plan on a courtroom screen, the exemption notation glaringly clear. The room fell silent. The judge, visibly irritated, grilled the HOA's lawyer, who admitted he hadn't checked the original documents. The case was dismissed with prejudice, barring refiling. Daniel didn't stop there. He countersued for fraud, harassment, and illegal collections. The judge's ruling was a bombshell. The HOA had to remove the lien, refund all my dues with interest, cover my legal fees, and pay $20,000 in punitive damages for their harassment. The total hit over $50,000. To cover it, the HOA levied a special assessment, doubling everyone's dues for a year. The community erupted. At the next meeting, Margaret had to announce the cost of her failed crusade. Residents, long silenced by her tyranny, ousted her in a landslide vote. 2 board members resigned in disgrace. I finished my workshop a stunning blend of modern function and 1940s charm. My furniture business soared, and I installed a bold metal sculpture in my yard, a defiant middle finger to the old HOA. Neighbors now nod respectfully. I didn't just win my freedom, I exposed their oppressors. A year later, the fallout deepened. The new board uncovered Margaret's mismanagement. She'd paid herself and cronies exorbitant fees and signed shady vendor contracts, costing Pine Grove nearly $100,000. Special assessments dragged on, forcing some residents to sell their homes. 3 other homeowners, inspired by my research, found exemptions or errors freeing them from HOA rules. The new board, wary of lawsuits, now only enforces safety-related violations. My sculpture became a local landmark, drawing art collectors and boosting my business. I hired assistants and may expand my workshop. Margaret, meanwhile, tried her tactics in a new HOA but faced legal trouble there, too, after I shared evidence of her past behavior. The county now requires HOA lawyers to verify property authority before filing liens, and my case is a legal precedent cited statewide. My neighbors are friendlier, hosting block parties and consulting me on community plans. I've taught woodworking classes in my workshop and crafted a memorial bench from my oak tree's lumber, honoring my grandfather. My property remains mine-free from petty tyrants, its sculpture catching the sunset's glow.